With that, I think I am ready to start this meeting. Without objection, I will go to my screen and see if I can get the slideshow up. And I'm going to minimize everybody. So welcome to the October meeting, and especially welcome Gary Friedman tonight, along with Mark Dolph. Gary is in beautiful Southern California, with smoke in his eyes, and Mark
where all
Dolph,
the fun is.
Mark is in beautiful Smoky Mountains, where there's probably no smoke. So our agenda is going to look like this. New members, guests. I've just introduced the two guests. We'll talk about recent meetups and upcoming meetups. We'll have the winning selections for Assignment Tulsa for September. And our theme of the month announcements as far as the winners. And the October theme of the month announcement. Then we'll have Gary Friedman talking about RAW versus JPEG, and then social distance time and food. Of course, you're on your own now. We've got this wonderful virus going around. Let's see if I can change the slide there. New members: Becky Faust, Vicki Hibbert, John Van Hoos, and Michael Reggie. Are any of those people on the meeting?
I haven't seen any of them. Becky Faust is a returning photog.
Okay.
She's been a member before, I know.
All right. So, Bill, are you going to keep an eye on the?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the participant list.
Okay. Now let's see if I can figure out. There we go. Oh, board member vacancies, a bit of business for tonight.
Little business before pleasure.
Business before pleasure. Bill and I talked earlier today. We have 3 board member vacancies coming up in 2021. Myself, Bill Oswald, and Andrew Rapensky, who's our secretary. We've talked to a few people, and we have I think some volunteers. We'll know more next month, but I'd like everybody to think about if they'd want to serve in one of these positions, to contact Andrew and send in a little bio. And then at our meeting next month, we can look at those, and people can discuss, and then we can either have a vote, or if we don't have any other nominees or anything, we can just accept the ones that have volunteered. Bill Oswald, do you have any other comments about this?
Well, sure. Just to kind of clear up some of the mystery, I've been on the board for 5 years, and this is the end of the 2-year term as executive director. I'm moving down from the board, although I hope to stay active as an event coordinator, and when we're ready to do banquets again, I'll join anyone that wants to be on the banquet committee. And unless we talk Andrew into it, his plans were to leave the board this year as well. So we have those 2 vacancies, and news at 11.
Right.
So is Bill Ramsey taking on a different position?
No, I'm considering staying on actually
Okay,
for
there we are.
There-
another year. If I have
Yeah, there have been some discussions behind the scenes and with some people kind of exploring some possibilities, but anyone is welcome to toss their name in the hat,
that's right.
particularly former board members who are at a loss for things to do, Gene.
I hear that. I'm not lost for things to do though.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that's the story on the board member vacancies. Recent meetups. Ta-da! Did anybody go to PhotoCon? I didn't.
There you have it.
Yes, I was there.
Well, hey, Pam, I didn't see you come on.
Pam?
Hi guys, I jumped on just a minute ago.
Good. So how was it, dear?
You know what? It was a great event as far as being able to do it live still, but we sure missed having people actually there. It just didn't have that same vibe, and so we don't ever discount if you're not able to make such an event. You're definitely missed, and we were feeling it this year. If you did buy a ticket and have access to it, all of the videos from the live event and the on-demand are available through November 21st for viewing. And if you did buy a ticket for this year's event, it will also get you into next year's 2021 PhotoCon. Hopefully it will be an actual real in-person event.
Well, let's hope so.
I hope so too. So, but it was really a lot of fun, and got to do the emceeing and introduce quite a few of the speakers, and then do the Q&A part towards the end. And also on the on-demand, Sapphire has done a little special on there about, it's called Sapphire's Not So Solid Choices. And it's about what we ladies should or shouldn't wear for a headshot session. So it's rather entertaining. You know, she's a bit of a pistol, that one.
Ah. Well, I'm glad you were there and emceed the thing, and I know a lot of people missed it. But
Yes, thank you. And you know, this year they had all local photographers, like from Oklahoma, who were speakers. Ones that I had never heard before. There's a guy, Lou405 is his Instagram handle, and he photographs cars that are drag racing and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people would find his photography work super interesting. Another gal named Lauren Midgley, who she does kind of an art form of photography that basically feels like you've been turned inside out with the concepts that she comes up with. And all of them are like self-portraits. And it's so interesting. She is a Photoshop guru, and her images are super interesting. And her Instagram is I Am Wonder and Light is her Instagram. But you
great.
can
Well,
check out the different speakers.
thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Great to see you guys here. I've missed you.
Good to you, yeah. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
We also had the gallery, Creative Concepts, and thank you for thanks for Kathy for arranging and working on that. Of course, Gene Christian did all the matting and collected all that stuff, and generally is the chief guru behind all that. And then we also had Dave Muller, who dressed up and got in right in front of the no parking sign at Apertures, and he put on a great Zoom meeting and showed us all the pictures. Someone had asked me, have I published the video? And my answer is no, but I'll get around to it in the next couple of days or so. So then I'll post it up on our YouTube channel.
But go see it live.
Yeah, that's the good point, Kathy. I've been to see it live myself, and it's an excellent representation of all your work.
Dave cleans up well.
Yeah. He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
From the waist up.
Big thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what color pajama bottoms he has on, but didn't get a laugh. Okay, we had 8 of our group attended the Top Gun polo event. Here's a few shots that Bill Oswald took, the opening ceremony. That's back when it wasn't raining. Another great image. And another one, I like the action there. I need to go to one of those. And then Jane Green posted one of her shots of where she was getting into the panning mode.
It's a great shot.
She did a good job.
That's a great job.
Yeah, I like it.
One of the writers described polo as like playing basketball on a court that's about 10 times the size of a basketball court or more, on top of a horse moving at full speed.
Yikes.
It's nice that she froze the horse and still caught the motion of the stick.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking too. The stick was moving faster than anything, obviously.
That worked out really nice.
That was fun. It was a challenge.
Yeah. All right, upcoming meetups, November 7th. Coffee at the PHOTOG Virtual Lodge. There won't be one this week. This coming, well, let's see. Yeah, right. There will not be one this Saturday. The next one will be on November 7th. And Bill Oswald is going to post the dates on which we'll have coffee on the website, on the event calendar.
Yeah. The theme for November 7th is autumn. Whether you took it this autumn or mine your archives and find your last trip to the Smokies or New England or something.
Thank you, Bill. Of course, our October deadlines are coming up for theme of the month and for assignment Tulsa. I'm sure Mark will let us know tonight how many entries he's received for people. And I hope it's a bunch. I know there's some waiting in the wings. I do know that. What's that, Larry?
I thought he had 2 openings today.
I didn't understand you, sir.
I thought he had 2 openings for that photo workshop today when I last looked.
Oh, well, that I don't know.
Okay.
The Friday Night Lights are starting the first Friday in December. Kathy, you want to mention that at all?
Well, we'll probably only have 3 Friday nights because the 4th Friday night will be Christmas. The locations are yet to be determined, but we are planning on having it. You know, in the past we did the Tulsa Art Crawl, the first Friday night. I don't know if we'll be having that. I don't know for sure if Philbrook is doing their decorations and that sort of thing. So I have a little bit of homework to do first to figure out where it is that we're going to go. But hopefully we will not break our tradition and still have them.
Oh, yeah. I can assure you that we will. And of course, we'll know more by our November meeting.
Yes.
And then December 13th, Jeannie Eaton is hosting the meteor shower event at 7 p.m. out at their ranch. So you can look on the event calendar and get the particulars on that. But if you're planning on going, be sure and register.
Mm-hmm.
upcoming library sessions. I'm pleased to announce that on November 18th, David Halpern, who's a legend here in Tulsa, if you've been to Gilcrease anytime in the last couple of years, you've seen his photographs hanging hanging there in the Helmerich Hall. He's going to present a presentation. He's got a recently published book. It's an image a year from 1967 to 2020. So we're going to get a peek really at his life's work. And he's going to describe, you know, everything from like curating it, doing some scanning, all the kinds of things that he went through to prep this. So I'm really happy about that. And make a note of the date, November 18th. It's the third Wednesday and not the fourth. Same thing for December. It's the third Wednesday, December 16th. I've got a friend I've known for many, many years who's a motivational speaker. They call him the pit bull of motivational speakers. And he's going to share with us some lessons learned from the pandemic, and then have basically an open floor. Ask Larry anything. You can ask him anything about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or whatever else is on your mind, and he'll have an answer for you. Now, if you have some questions that you'd like to ask Larry, go ahead and send them to me via email or message or whatever, and I'll make a list of them and send them to him in advance. So I'm looking forward to the last couple of months. We've got a couple of great shows coming up, and I hope everybody can make it. All right, theme of the month. Jean.
I'm here. I have to see the pictures though, because, oh, okay. So we'll start with the best of show. And the honor went to Michael Erdak. That his image, this image, was voted as the best of show for our creative concepts show.
Wow.
Way to go, Michael.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is an awesome shot.
And a well-deserved win there.
Yeah.
Thank you very kindly.
Totally. Very cool.
Yep. You light up the show tonight, Michael.
Can I ask a technical question? Can I ask a technical question about how that was done?
Yeah, Michael, why don't you explain that?
Can you go back, Bill? to the image?
I don't know. Can I?
There you go.
I'm guessing you had wireless flash coming from the table below, and that also created the shadows on the bottom half of the bulb. How did you get it on the top half?
Am I? Just a moment. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Speak up.
Whoops, there we go. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I was having audio issues.
That's better.
Okay. There we go.
That's good.
Actually, I used a couple of LED panels under the perforated metal, and the light bulb reflected every LED, and I got around that by putting a sheet of white paper between the LED panels and the underside of the perforated metal. And the rest of it was I connected a light dimmer switch to the bulb using wires fed through the bottom of the perforated panel and soldered them to the back side of the bulb so you wouldn't be able to see them in the photo.
And I'm guessing you fed the bulb maybe 10 or 15 volts, so it wasn't as bright as it could be?
Exactly. I used a dimmer switch for that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well done.
It was a
I'm impressed.
shocking experience. Literally. Been a lot of fun.
That's a great shot.
Thank you.
That is a good shot. All right. Thanks, Michael.
You bet.
All right, so our September theme was abstract and no wild card for that.
All right. You ready?
I am. So the novice runner-up goes to Kenneth Krause. Congratulations, Kenneth. Hey, Belinda, are you coaxing him to come or are you talking to a dog?
No, he's right there. He said thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Well, that's awesome. All right.
He's kind of like 5 feet from the microphone. So yeah.
All right. Because I can't see anything but your name. Thank you, Kenneth.
Well, I use my computer from work and we have them all blacked out.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, he's here. He's not saying much.
All right.
All right. He doesn't have to say much. He's got a winning shot there. All right, next.
The novice first place goes to Julie Abers. Is she on tonight?
Way to go,
She
Julie.
is.
Yay!
Hey, Julie,
Hey,
how do you
Julie.
do that?
I took a glass panel out of a picture frame so that I could put a light under it. It's actually a star-shaped dish, and I used water and oil and food coloring and stirred it up, and that's what I got.
All right. So
That's a cool shot.
I'm curious. Did you put the food coloring then in individual drops of oil?
No, I mixed water and oil in the dish and then just dropped in the food coloring.
Okay. And so then the food coloring just absorbed into some of those blobs.
Yeah.
Because that is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's a great shot.
I
Very
was
cool.
proud of it.
Yeah.
So what light source was well, is there a light source under it? Is that where the white's coming from?
Yes. It's some handheld light that I borrowed from Belinda.
Okay. All right. Well, I see some lines going through it, and I was trying to figure out if those were shades from a nearby window or if it was from the light source, because my light table will bend like that. But it adds it's interesting to see those lines because my brain's trying to figure it out where they came from.
I wasn't sure where they came from either.
It could be from the light source. Some,
Okay.
especially if it's an LED type,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that they can do that. So, but that's an awesome image.
Thank you.
So I hope you print that for our gallery show next year.
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Next.
Abstract advanced runner-up goes to Penny Watson. Is Penny on tonight?
I haven't seen her yet.
Okay.
Either.
I will let her know she won. That I'm thinking that is a petal from a flower.
Probably a good guess. I like it.
I like it. And
Michael's stealing the show
abstract
tonight.
first place goes to Michael Erdak.
Wow.
And so, Michael, I know we already had a conversation about this picture and how you did it, but can you share that with the others?
Certainly. That is that's the wall at the boathouse at Gathering Place when they had the green canopy lights going. When I took the photo of the wall, the green was only across one edge of each one of those fiberglass shingles, and I saturated the green. That caused it to go across all of the shingles almost in a uniform color, and it worked out fairly well. I also turned it on its side so that the shingles were horizontal instead of vertical.
Ah,
It's a cool abstract.
it is a cool abstract. I like it.
Thank you very much. I'm shocked.
Don't be shocked.
Shouldn't be.
Well, thank
Really?
you all. I appreciate the votes.
Yeah.
Okay, so our October theme, it's due October 31st by 11 p.m. Our theme is candy, and any aspect of this works. So if you have the candy itself, that's fine. If somebody's making candy and you want to focus in on some aspect of that, that works too. There are a lot of different things you can do. It doesn't have to be Halloween candy. It could be any kind of candy. So take your pick.
All right. I know what my image is going to be. I just have to go out and take it. I guess I better get busy.
That's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
Well, the rain hasn't helped us either.
No, it hasn't. But Friday's supposed to be nice.
I wonder if M&Ms melt in the rain.
Melt in your mouth.
I bet they melt in the rain too.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Just a quick note. I would really appreciate everybody sending me everybody that did send me images from for the Fairest of the Fair meeting that we had last month. I took the liberty, since we didn't have a vote, since I run the presentation, I get to do certain things, and I picked a couple of images out. For those that didn't see him, I think this was Richard Harkin's shot of tallies, and I just thought it was really, really good.
I think we heard the story of that. Yeah.
Yeah, he told the story of running out there and getting that
Yeah,
shot.
yeah. Richard, do you have this available for sale yet?
Yes, at the Creative Gallery.
It's on my hard drive,
Yeah.
so yeah, I can make it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the next shot is Dave Muller. Antarctic Moon said he didn't get to attend the meeting because he was off in Colorado, but this is another spectacular.
He's with us tonight.
Yeah, I thought he'd like to see this.
Is that a
Yeah.
composite shot?
No, I
Wow.
don't think so. I don't know, Dave, where are you? He was here earlier.
He still shows out there.
Yeah, hi. No, it was about 1:30 in the morning in a boat sailing in Antarctica. I looked out the window and saw this or something similar, got dressed, went out, and it was gone. So I went back in, got in my pajamas, and it appeared again when we in between mountains. And so I went out in my pajamas, and this is a handheld single shot.
Impressive. And the boat was moving, right?
And the boat was moving.
And
Looks like a long lens, like 600 millimeter.
Yeah, what did it was probably a 200 to 600 millimeter.
Impressive.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Dave. All right, assignment Tulsa. We've got Mark Dolph here with us. And I'm going to let him take over the microphone and lead us down this path.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Before we jump into this month's winners, just a quick comment. I got to speak with David Halpern a couple of weeks ago, and he shared with me his latest work, An Image a Year, and I think you'll really enjoy that when you get with David next month. A couple of comments about the September Parks images. The only negative I can share with you is that we had fewer entries for September than we did for July and August. We had 32 entries compared to 40 and 38 for the first 2 months. So I hope that's not a trend. Let's go the other way and get lots of entries for people. I'll also say that the September entries, again for parks, were probably the most difficult for the judges to come up with their top 10. They were uniformly excellent, and that led to probably the widest divergence between the three judges on what they had in their top 10. 19 of the 32 entries received votes. But again, the quality of these is just outstanding. So it's a pleasure to see these each month. And now I know why Dave Mueller sent his in so early, seeing that he was in Antarctica. We had to get his in early. And the other thing I want to say before we show you the winning entries is that we have the first 4 months intended to have 9 winners. And for July and August, we had 9 winners. This time there are 10. And that comes down to the fact that we had a 4-way tie for 7th, and I could not find a good fair way to break the tie. I went to 2 tiebreakers, and at that point, I threw my hands up and said, we're going to have 10 this month. And so we have 10. Again, they're all terrific works. As you may guess, when you see the first one, Bill, let's go ahead and show the overall winner for this month. It is courtesy of Bill Ramsey, Lights On at the Boathouse from the Gathering Place. 9 of the 32 entries for September were images within the Gathering Place. So it really speaks to how popular Gathering Place has become, what a great place it is to take your camera out and get some terrific photographs. And I think this one, in hindsight, if Bill had taken it in August, could have been iconic, because I think that's what's happening with the Gathering Place and structures like the boathouse. It really has become an iconic image. You saw an earlier photograph, Michael Yurdak's wall there of the boathouse, the backside wall, on how many ways you can compose and represent features within the Gathering Place. So congratulations, Bill. This is going to look great in one of those really large frames that we have for each month's overall winners.
Well, thanks, Mark. I guess I'm just lucky nobody else entered one of those. I've seen several of our members take that shot, and I was surprised that no one else did. I know Richard and Pat and several of us have taken that shot. In fact, it was funny because I was there. It was on a Sunday night, and I'd taken some images of the park over where the Cathedral Square is, and then I decided to go on over to the Gathering Place, and I figured the lights would be on, but it was right at 8 o'clock, and they closed at 8, and they popped on. I was just getting ready to pack up my tripod and leave. When the lights came on, I took 3 or 4 shots and then left. So I was lucky to get that image.
Timing is everything.
Yeah.
We should put a reminder in here that the judges don't see the names of the photographer or the text of the write-up. I think, do they see the title of the image?
Just the title. You're correct. The only, besides the image, the only information the judges have is the title of the work. They don't see the description. They don't, again, know who took the photograph, just the title.
Just wanted to remind everyone that the fix wasn't in. It's a great image, Bill.
Thank you. Next.
It is. And don't ever tell anybody that it was a lucky shot. That was skill, my friend.
And to repeat Bill's caveat of just a few seconds ago, the fix was not in. The judges really like this, and it is of Gilcrease Museum. And I'll make another comment. Of the 10 winners this month, those 10 images represent 7 different Tulsa area parks. So that means we have one park that's repeated, which you can probably guess by now what it's going to be.
Whose picture is this?
Kenneth Krause.
This is by Kenneth Krause, and it is of the gazebo there in Stewart Park on the pond, the larger pond, on the grounds of Gilcrease Museum. And as Kenneth indicates in the last sentence, and I'm quoting, "I've spent many an afternoon relaxing and reflecting here. as a museum employee, I see lots of visitors go down, sit in the gazebo, and reflect. Now, Kenneth's shot is from the other side, obviously, where the heron sculptures are, I suspect. He was in that general area shooting across to the gazebo. And as you'll see with some of the other winners tonight, a beautiful black and white image.
Thank you, Kenneth. Next.
And here we have by Sarah Heyman, I'm going by memory, a park that I had not visited until I had seen all of these entries in September. And like some of the other folks have mentioned in their comments to me, either when they turn an image in or in their description, Assignment Tulsa has compelled them during the pandemic to get up off the couch and go out and explore Tulsa, and in this case, explore parks that perhaps they had not visited in the past. So the first weekend in October, my wife and I went out for the very first time to Redbud Valley and saw this scene that Sarah captured in her photograph. From her description, I think this is a place she visits often.
I hadn't been there in a long time.
Well, it's a great place for those that have not been there. It's really different. It's not what you would expect 2 miles north of the Cherokee Casino.
No, and it was really cool because you can sit there and you can listen to people up above going in and out of the cliffs and the caves up top.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a
real variety of visitors, from little children to people Bill and I's generation.
Yeah, and I haven't been out there in forever either. I'm going to have to plan a trip. It'd be maybe a good weekend. I love the way you did the lighting, Sarah. It's
Oh, thank you.
pretty.
Well, most of that was done by sunlight.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happened to be that time of the morning and sun was coming in through the trees right there.
So very nice.
Thank you.
You know what I like there is the reminder to just sit and listen. Sometimes as photographers, we get caught up in our craft, and we don't pay proper attention to what's around us. And that's a good reminder, Sarah.
Thank you.
Well, and I agree, Bill. And I think so many of these come out of this need to reflect right now because of the pandemic, to really think about what is important. And several of these, at least for me, speak to that human need. And here's one that I had to, this is where I did break the rule a little bit. I let my judges know where this was taken, because if you weren't familiar with the park, which is Reconciliation Park, and the sculpture there in Hope Plaza, this one may have been difficult. So I did share with the judges that this was taken there in the park. And then I think the title really makes a lot of sense. And Robert, a lot of ingenuity, I think, went into this shot, including dragging the letter.
Thank you. Yeah, I just went down to test shoot it with my camera and they turned out good. So, with my phone.
Is this an iPhone photograph?
Yes, an iPhone. I was just testing it to see if it would turn out okay or be a good shot. So, and it turned out I liked it. So, and National Geographic said this is the #1 park in America right now. The most important because of everything that's happening.
Well, and you may already know this, but Reconciliation Park has been designated as a site of conscience.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So when, again, this idea of reflecting, and in this case, reflecting on the past and how the past is informing the present. If you haven't visited this park in a while, I walk through there probably every couple of weeks. It's a very meaningful place.
Yeah.
I love it there.
Nice work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So this is an example, a great example of the theme people taking on different forms. I guess they don't have to actually be flesh and blood. They can be bronze.
All right, next.
And I think, Anitra, you're a three-peater at this point. Anitra has had images chosen in each of the first three contests. The judges really like the composition, the way the curvilinear line leads your eye to the young skateboarder catching air. And so this is the second of the three winning images taken in the gathering place. And Anitra makes the point that she's so grateful for the addition of the gathering place. And I think that's a uniform sentiment for Tulsans after having the gathering place open now little over 2 years. It's, again, my wife and I go out there probably every other weekend and have a hot coffee there by the pond. It's just a terrific addition to Tulsa. And I suspect to Tulsa photographers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anitra's not on with us this evening, but it's a great shot.
Yeah, I love this shot. If you look at all the genres for skateboarding, they're always taking the fisheye lenses a few inches from the skateboarder. This is completely different and still a great shot.
Thanks, Gary. We'll let Anitra know. Okay, next.
And this is a photograph that, at least for me, just as David Kidd explains in his description, for me, it's very nostalgic. I can remember, as David shares, like these contests that my brother and I would have on a swing, who could get the highest and who could jump out the furthest. This again is at the gathering place. You see a man with his son, or perhaps his grandson, there in one of these isolated little coves off the main trail in the gathering place. Another great black and white photograph, as Anitra's was. And as David comments in his final sentence, I agree. It's amazing that we never got hurt doing the crazy things we did in the playground swings.
Yeah.
Great composition too, the A-frames of the swing forming the kind of center of the photograph.
Very nice.
David, I don't know if you're on, but I think this is David's second winning entry in the 3 months we've had the contest. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And here's what Dave Mueller sent in before I guess he headed off for Antarctica, titled Freedom in the Garden. This is on the grounds of Philbrook Museum. And he comments that late summer, early fall, the monarch butterflies visit the gardens there at Philbrook. And as he says, his picture was very intentional. The concept was to capture and provide a sense of place, which if you've been to Philbrook, you immediately recognize the backside of the museum building there, the villa. And then to capture the beautiful image composition framing the monarch above the flowers. Just a beautiful image, Dave.
Great shot, Dave.
Thank you.
I thought I'd mention that Anitra just joined us a moment ago.
Oh, really?
Anitra, congratulations. You're 3 for 3.
Oh my gosh, wow. Thank you so much. That's a big surprise. Wonderful.
Full picture.
All right, Dave. I'll go to the next one. Nice job.
And Scott Smith presents Outcrop, again from the Redbud Valley Nature Preserve. And in his description, Scott mentions that Assignment Tulsa provided a wonderful reason for me to load up my photography gear and head out. And again, I mentioned earlier, many people have commented to me that the Assignment Tulsa in general has been a kind of catalyst to get out and explore Tulsa, whether it's buildings, it's parks, finding iconic images, and now I hope, and what I've already seen, the entries for people for October doing the same thing. And again, you can see how, when I first saw this, not knowing the description of where this was, I thought, oh, this is Chandler Park. And it's on the other side of Tulsa, out in far eastern part of the city. And you do see these great outcroppings of rock, whether they're granite or sedimentary formations. It's really a unique landscape out there, and I would encourage you to visit it when you get a chance. I bet the fall colors out there now are really starting to pop.
Yeah. I don't guess Scott's on here tonight, but way to go, Scott.
So we had 2 winners from Redbud Valley.
Right. That is surprising, isn't it? Ruthie.
And Ruthie, I think, is another three-peater.
Yeah.
And I was really pleased to see a great photograph coming from the Tulsa Zoo. It is the most visited park in Tulsa and has a special place in many Tulsans' heart. And this great image of Lexi, our very own giraffe, who has the distinction of giving birth to a calf here at the zoo on July 22nd, 2018. So thank you, Ruthie, for focusing in on Lexi.
Right.
Ruthie's on an airplane, so she's not here, but she'll know in the morning.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll talk to her, Kathy.
Yep.
And we have Woodward Park, represented by Susan Vineyard, with Foreshadowing, the Magic of Books and Gardens. And I mentioned earlier that nostalgia was one of the themes that I personally saw in several of these photographs. For me, this one is also that nostalgic reflection back that Susan mentions that, I think if I remember right, this was her first date with her husband-to-be, an outdoor performance of William Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. She later found the Art Deco Shakespeare Memorial up on the hill there, and then later found this sculpture by Tulsa's own Rosalind Cook with the little girl reading Romeo and Juliet. So all kinds of literature, references in literature, put it that way.
That's a beautiful picture.
Thank you.
I like
Again, by breaking kind of, I don't know that it was a rule, but we're going to have 9 winners. By having 10 this time, as I mentioned earlier, I couldn't find a good way to break the 4-way tie for 7th, that it allowed additional works like this one. So Susan, if you've joined us, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Shakespeare has always been very special to me in Tulsa, because my son, when he was in high school, was in theater in all the Tulsa theaters, and he played Shakespeare a lot, and I was behind the scenes helping him and the other kids learn Shakespeare, and so the references to Shakespeare in that park are very special to me. And I love the herb garden around her too. That's another thing that's great.
You know, I like the vignette. I don't often use a vignette on a photograph, but this one is just, it really makes that photograph, in my opinion.
Thank you. It's kind of, this statue's kind of hidden back, I think. I found it. I didn't even know it was there for a long time, and then I found it, and I like the fact that it's kind of a little secret herb garden back there.
Yeah.
It's over there on the east side of the park. correct, Susan?
Yes, it is.
Kind of south of the flagpole.
Yeah, it's over fairly close to the road and to the houses. So, and north of Lynette, what is his name?
Linnaeus?
Yes, his garden, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well.
So with that, again, congratulations to all of you folks that are in this month's winning entries. I will say, Bill, as of today, sitting here in the Smoky Mountains, I have 9 entries for October. That is not unusual based on the first 2 months that I get probably 2/3 of the entries in the last 4 days of the month. And that's fine, that's okay. So I would encourage you, you've got what, 4 days left to get out and get your entries in. The entries that we have so far, because I do see them just to make sure I have everything I need as they come into me and reply back that I've received it. They range from the whimsical and very lighthearted images of people doing what people do across Tulsa to images that reflect the times we're living through, the pandemic. And then a couple of them are quite serious, again, reflecting the times we're living in. So actually accomplishing all of the images that we've seen, whether it's been the buildings, the icons, the parks, and now the building people, are reflecting what I hope this contest would do and present Tulsa. Didn't know we were going to have a pandemic to live through when Bill and Kathy and I put this together, but I couldn't be more pleased with the kinds of images we've received and are now receiving for October. So keep it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to play this again. I found a new toy. So, talking briefly about next month's assignment Tulsa theme is wide open. It can include any of the previous month's themes or anything else that you think would represent Tulsa that might win you a spot in the winner's circle. Again, no limit on post-processing. However, if you make a composite, all parts of the image must be your own work. In other words, if you add textures or skies, etc., they've got to be your own image and they must be taken in November. So those are the only caveats as far as post-processing are concerned.
And Bill, we will have 12 winners in November.
Right, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, 12 winners. Don't think you have to make a composite or anything like that. I mean, there is an unbelievable number of, things and places and people or whatever that you can, shoot to represent Tulsa. So thank you again, Mark. And
this is a reminder.
And Bill,
this is a reminder, Bill, to take his medicine. Okay, we have our keynote waiting in the wings here. Gary Friedman, rocket scientist, photographer, teacher, inventor, and certified geek.
Not everybody can be a certified geek. Usually it's just geek.
That's right.
You have to go through a certification process.
Right. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing and wave at everybody. Well, Gary, Gary, I really appreciate you doing this tonight. We are honored and blessed to have you with us. And I hope that we can have you again next year once you're relocated in Boston and find your tools and camera.
That would certainly be fun. Before I begin, I just want to mention, you've got so much talent in your club. I mean, I've been around the world. I've been giving seminars. I spoke to a lot of clubs. They have a lot of talent. Not always. I've been sitting here watching outstanding image after outstanding image, and you all have so much to be proud of. It's an honor to lecture to you. And thank you for that introduction, especially the certified geek part.
Yeah.
For those of you who are looking at like the Brady Bunch view of all the speakers, if you want my slides to be larger, in the upper right-hand corner where you see speaker view, or maybe you can toggle that between gallery view and speaker view. If you go to the gallery view, you get the Brady Bunch, and speaker view is whatever is there is largest, or I guess whoever's talking is largest. Right now, I'm seeing Bill, and I'm kind of up there in the corner. And once again, please confirm to me that you can the letters in my slides are coming out forwards.
Yes.
Rather than backwards.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. All right. In that case, let's go. I'm getting to here. Here we go. Here we go. So we're here to talk about a very religious subject. As I mentioned before the thing began, we always talked about, I have 2 other lectures planned. One that talks about Judaism versus Buddhism, one that talks about Mac versus PC, and this one here, the third religious debate, which is RAW versus JPEG. Many of you already know this difference, and many of you already know the benefits of shooting RAW. My goal is to make this not a religious topic. There's actually benefits to shooting JPEG that nobody ever talks about. And JPEGs are not the same as JPEGs were 20 years ago. And let me kind of go over these one item at a time. Before I begin, let me give you a real quick rundown of my credentials. I run the stock photography website, friedmanarchives.com. And I license my images to book and magazine editors around the world. We go over here. This is my website here. On top, you can click and purchase some of my ebooks written about mirrorless cameras. I'm the author of the best-selling ebooks on Sony, Fujifilm, and Olympus. And this is the stock image gallery. My favorite topic is wireless flash. If you click on that, you got a whole bunch of other things coming up, which I'm not going to do right now because this entire presentation is being done over 4G. So let's not use bandwidth if we don't need to. In addition to that, I talked about the ebooks that I write about popular cameras. I hear a call coming in. And the third slide, which I wanted to talk about, but I haven't yet, I'm also associate editor of Cameracraft magazine in the UK. And I have 1 or 2 articles in every issue. And I'll have a plug for that toward the end of the talk. So let me get started by sharing something with you, like the worst possible thing you could possibly want from a JPEG. Now, if you don't have this magnified on your screen, I'm going to make this a little bit larger right now. Yuck! Look at all those JPEG compression artifacts, especially over here, like across where the teeth are. Yeah, that's the worst thing ever. If that's what a JPEG is, I'm never going to shoot JPEG ever again. That is the worst. Okay, enough overacting. This is also a JPEG. And by the way, this is what they call a high frequency JPEG, where if you're going to be seeing JPEG compression artifacts, you would see it here. This shot was designed for that. And let me go for a close-up, and there's no evidence of JPEG compression artifacts whatsoever. So right away, people start to get confused. How can this possibly be? I've always heard that JPEGs were inferior to RAW. How can all the experts on my favorite internet discussion forum be wrong? And then, you know, people will say, well, you've only spoken for 3 minutes and already your credibility is called into question. I'm going to explain all of this right now. And let me start with the RAW files. And again, most of you are experienced shooters, and you already know most of this. RAW files are the path to the very best image quality your camera can produce. There's no JPEG compression artifacts, ever, and you get to spend your life energy processing them instead of having the camera do it. And it's great for giant enlargements and professional submissions. RAW, the biggest benefit to RAW is it has a greater dynamic range. Dynamic range is how much light that the camera can capture. JPEGs can capture this much, RAW can capture this much, a little bit wider. Some say JPEGs are around 8 stops, and RAW is about 14, 15 stops, depending on the camera. Now, every time you see a comparison between what JPEG and RAW can do in this situation, they always show you an example where it's not, the JPEG's not quite wide enough to capture everything, but the RAW is. Let me tell you that there are plenty of examples in the real world where the dynamic range of the scene you're looking at will exceed even what a RAW file can capture. Sometimes you have to take several images, bracket them, and then merge them later on in Photoshop using the HDR technique. But every time people tell you RAW has wider dynamic range, they will show you an example like this where it's just wide enough to be captured by RAW, but not by a JPEG. These, by the way, are huge horse monuments called the Kelpies in Scotland, which I captured a few years ago when I was speaking there. Greater dynamic range also when your light isn't quite so good. If you shoot RAW, you stand a better chance of being able to manipulate it better in Photoshop later on if your light's not so good. Now here's a real worst case scenario. I was taking a casual picture of a couple by a Christmas tree. The flash didn't go off. And rather than deleting those two underexposed ones, I decided, I wonder what would happen if I would brought these two images into Photoshop and tried to recover all the missing detail. And what you see here is the results. The top image was the JPEG, and I did the best I could with hers, and I was able to recover the image. But then I started with the RAW file on the bottom, and the RAW file came out much, much better. And all the RAW pundits, of course, will look at this and say, see, you should only be shooting RAW. If you shoot JPEG, you're obviously an idiot. And my response to that is, well, yeah, but if you're underexposing your shots by 4 stops, how can you possibly call yourself a serious photographer? Anyway, RAW files are indeed more malleable. And if in case your light's not good, it's a nice mechanism to have later on. This also came in handy when I saw Northern Lights for the very first time. I grew up in California. I don't know what the Northern Lights are. We were up in Canada. And again, I shot RAW and JPEG at the same time because you just don't know what the white balance should be when you're out in the field. And nothing I did made it look on the camera like it looked to my eye. Whether you're shooting film or digital, you cannot capture the Northern Lights the way it looks to your eye. It's a really weird thing. When I shot JPEG, it came out like this in the upper left-hand corner. And I tried to manipulate it in Photoshop, try to make it look like almost like an off-white LED. That's how it looked to my eye. That's the closest I could come by manipulating the JPEG. Manipulating the RAW, I was able to go much, much further. Still not enough to match what my eye could see, but it's a whole lot better. One of the big reasons that RAW is more malleable than JPEGs is you have 16 bits per color channel, whereas JPEG only has 8. When you start to do manipulations, you're going to get what they call quantization of color. You can't always get a smooth transition from here to here. So that's why sometimes when you do extreme manipulations with a JPEG, you're going to get color shift and color banding. When you shoot with 16 bits per channel, now that's being misleading. Most RAW files actually have 12 to 14 bits, but the container, the RAW file, can hold up to 16 bits if only your sensor could produce that. But still, you get more bits per channel, and it makes it more malleable, and you don't get the kind of color quantization that happens with extreme manipulation. Here's an example of extreme manipulation with a JPEG where it just didn't come out right. Now, normally, I like to get my light right and my exposure right for that light. If your light sucks, there's not much you can do, but you can try to manipulate later on and get more contrast later to make it a mildly more interesting shot. On the bottom here is what I tried to do, and if you look up the sky, right above this iceberg, and I'm going to make it bigger in just a second, you can see the splotchiness which happened as a result of the extreme manipulation from a JPEG. Start with a RAW file, that doesn't happen at all. So if you look very carefully, you can see the artifacts. Another great example, now this comes with the story. How much time do we have? If I run over a little bit, is that okay?
And that's fine, yeah.
Okay, great. So I was a photojournalist in the Soviet Republic of Latvia back in 1988. And this was back in the days of the evil empire, and Gorbachev was in charge. He had just put in place his glasnost and perestroika policies about openness and transparency. And I was there documenting a cultural exchange between Soviet and American high school students. And it was, it's actually online on my website, and I can send you all a link for that. It's probably some of the best work I ever did. But I was also very arrogant when I was in my 20s. And I said to myself, you know what? Here's a statue of Lenin. Tourists take pictures of statues of Lenin. I'm not a tourist. I'm a professional. So I didn't, well, I didn't think I had taken a picture of Lenin statue until 20 years later, when all the kids who participated in this cultural exchange had a reunion. And some of the Russian journalists were asking me, what was it like 20 years ago? Were the statues of Lenin everywhere? We don't know about that. So I begrudgingly went through all my old, what I call the N-1 shots, the shots that didn't make the final cut. And sure enough, I found a slide I must have taken begrudgingly, because it was backlit. I was shooting slides. There's not much dynamic range. And I guess I wanted to cover my bases, but I certainly wasn't serious about it because really bad light. So I was able to scan the slide using my Nikon Cool scanner, and I was able to manipulate it just that much using Photoshop. I could bring out the detail with Lenin. And then you can see the color shift. It went from gray to green. And this, again, has to do with what happens when you do extreme manipulations, even with RAW, even with 12 and 14 bits per channel, you can get the color shift. I was able to solve this problem by moving the final image to black and white, because everybody knows that history happened in black and white. So, and then nobody questioned it. But that's a really good example of a curve manipulation doing a color shift. So let's go into a little bit of detail. Two things happen when you shoot a RAW file. Number one, it pulls the bits from the sensor. Number two, it writes it to the card. That's it. What happens when you shoot a JPEG? Well, it pulls the bits from the sensor, and then it does things that a 1 hour photo place normally does. It adjusts the contrast, it adjusts the sharpness, it does the white balance for you, and then it compresses the image, throwing away information that your eye and your brain cannot perceive, and then it writes it to the card. I'm going to go over that again, but in a little bit more detail. All of these squares here happen every time you take a JPEG with your camera. And some of them appeared on the previous slide. You press the shutter release button, it pulls the data from the sensor, and then it does a process I haven't talked about yet called demosaicing. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in just a minute. And then it does a little bit of noise reduction if it's warranted, and then the 1 hour photo place comes in. Adjust the contrast, adjust the color balance, adjust the sharpness, and then it compresses the image, throwing away information that the eye and the brain cannot perceive. Then it writes the data to the card, and then, and this is important, it throws the original raw data away. Now this angers a lot of people. They see this as the equivalent of taking your negatives, giving it to the 1 hour photo place, keeping your prints, and then throwing the negatives away. You are praying that the person who operated that 1 hour photo machine did everything properly. You're hoping that they exposed for the sky and the rainbow rather than the horizon down there, because a print can't capture both. So this is one of the biggest complaints about JPEG. It throws the original raw data away. What if you need it? What if your exposure wasn't perfect? When you shoot a RAW file, only the green boxes happen. Demosaicing has to happen on your computer. All the 1 hour photo has to happen on your computer with you. You get to spend your life energy behind the computer rather than having the camera do it for you. And then the original raw data is not discarded. I really had to remove that box. So that's the biggest difference. Now you may be wondering, if the camera does so little during RAW creation, then why does it take so long to write a RAW file to the card? And the answer is, well, RAW files are this big and JPEGs are this big. And the JPEGs take less time to write to the card. That's why sports shooters almost never will shoot RAW, because if you're shooting in machine gun mode, you want to be able to write those images to your camera as quickly as possible. Demosaicing is something I said I would defer. This is what it is. See all those gray squares on the very bottom? That's all the megapixels in your sensor. Those are actually black and white pixels, so they can only sense shades of gray. Light intensity, that's it. If you want to figure out the color, you have to cheat. And the cheapest way of cheating is still with us. It was invented in the 1970s by Dr. Baer, who worked at Kodak, because we all remember Kodak was a pioneer for digital imaging, and nobody even knows who Kodak is anymore. Your grandkids certainly don't. But Dr. Baer invented the Baer filter, and it worked like this. You put a very difficult to manufacture color array on top of every single pixel. Here's a case where the blue, I hope you can see the mouse over here, the blue is placed over this pixel. So whenever you read the information from the sensor, you can know for certain what the blue content for that pixel is. But you have to figure out, you have to guess what the other two colors are, what the red and the green values are. Over here next to it, there's a green filter on top of this pixel. You have to figure out what the red and the blue values are. And this process of guessing the other two values is called demosaicing. No two cameras do it alike. No two pieces of software on your computer do it alike. They're all different. But believe it or not, this is how you turn a black and white image into a color image, and you probably never even knew it. To give an example of the difference you can find between your computer-based photo editors, I took one image here, I shot raw, and I was looking for the noise in the shadows, because if you're going to evaluate image quality, you want to look at the noise in the shadows. That's where it appears. And 3 different image processing programs were used. Sony's image data converter, which is no longer being offered by Sony. A free raw converter called Raw Therapy. You can download that offline. And Lightroom. As you can see, these 3 programs did vastly different work. And many of you will say, well, Sony's program looks superior. Look, there's no noise at all. And that may appear to be true initially, but if you look very closely, you'll also see that the lack of noise was obtained at the expense of detail. Clean images and detail, noise cleaning and detail are trade-offs. Usually, you want to go for programs that can do a healthy balance of the two. And that's what Lightroom does. Raw Therapy goes for the most detail and the least amount of denoising. Lightroom has a nice balance. There's other programs out there. There's Bibble, there's DxO. DxO has been getting awards for their kind of demosaicing. You only see the difference when you're shooting at high ISO and you want to clean it up later on your computer. So this is an example taken from a corner of an image that was shot at like ISO 3200. DxO did a better job, but it doesn't always do a better job. You know, I could feed it in another image where Adobe Camera Raw might be superior. And that's why it's so hard to choose a post-processing program. Not every program does the best job with every single image. Compression is something else that is very controversial. And in the old days, when JPEGs were brand new, the camera manufacturers were very overzealous in the amount of compression. The idea behind compression is to make your image take up much less space on your memory card than it normally would. And there's many different ways of doing compression. Let me show you, let me give you a really, really ridiculous example. This is a picture of a Japanese flag. Can I have a volunteer from somebody in the photo club? Raise your hand, because I can actually see most of you. I need a volunteer with a pen and a paper, because we're going to do a quick exercise right now. And everybody's frozen. I see Mark's like frozen like this, but that just could be a bad signal. And I just have the last for you. Okay, Bill, go ahead. So you got. Let's go with pixel number 1. I want you to write down the 3 values. Are you ready? 255, 255, 255. What I'm doing here is giving you the values for the very, very first pixel in the upper left-hand corner of this Japanese flag. Got that?
Got it.
Okay, pixel number 2, 255, 255, 255. Those are the red, green, and blue values for that particular pixel. Got it?
Did you say 255 again?
Yes, 255, 255, 255. That's what it takes to make white. The red, green, and blue channels are all at their maximum value. So that's the value for the second pixel. Ready for the third? How much time do we have, by the way? You can see where this is going. So, yeah, this is how a TIFF file is made. All you do is put together. Point 1, 255, 255, 255, and you go all the way down to point 24,385,000. This is for a 24 megapixel sensor. And somewhere in the middle, it's 255,000. That's red, green, and blue. Your red channel is maxed out. Your green and blue are 0. That's how you get the red circle. And then you go for the other white ones. This is how you make a TIFF file with that Japanese flag. It's, do I have the space here? Yeah, uncompressed, okay, I don't have it here, but it tends to, TIFF files can be larger than RAW files. Now here's the same Japanese flag represented with much less information. A white rectangle of these dimensions and a big red circle with this diameter in the center, with this radius in the center. I just described the same Japanese flag with much less information than what the TIFF file represented. This is the greatest compression ever. I could fit so many images on my memory card if I just used this technique. Now, of course, you can't always do it because you can't always have a simple subject. And that is one of the reasons why the more detail you have in your subject, the less you can compress your image. JPEG images aren't always, you can't always know how big a JPEG image is going to be because it all depends on how much detail there is. And that's why whenever you're looking at your camera, when it's telling you, here's how much more images that'll fit on your memory card, it's only a guess. It has no idea. So it averages everything together. Now, there's a difference between lossy and lossless compression. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of SIT files and zip files. You probably all have because they were invented during the era when modems ruled the world. And they were designed to compress the information so it wouldn't take as much time to send it by modem. But it was imperative that when you unzipped it at the other end, it was bit for bit identical to whatever you started with on the sending end. That limited them quite a bit. There is something called lossless compression, which doesn't have that requirement. With lossless compression, you can survive a couple of bit hits. It doesn't have to be bit for bit identical with the sender. Where is this appropriate? Well, if you're compressing an MP3 file, for example, an audio file where the human ear would not be able to discern if a bit was off or not. Or if you're actually sending an image that gets looked at. If you're a couple bits off here and there, the human eye won't be able to pick it up. So for instances like that, it makes sense to make lossy compression. When you throw away a few bits that the eye and the brain can't perceive, you could actually make the compression smaller and smaller. Ideal for JPEG, as long as you don't get too aggressive about it. So here's a quick example. If you just have an uncompressed 24 megapixel RAW file, you write it to your memory card, it's about 36 megabytes. And yes, it's bigger than the amount of megapixels that your camera has. If you have a zip version, now remember zip or SIT files, those are lossless compression. You can only compress it so much. You can squeeze it down a little bit from 36 to about 29 megabytes. If you have a lossy compression like a JPEG, and most cameras have the ability to save your JPEG in 3 different compression levels. The fine tends to be somewhere in the middle. That's a medium quality JPEG. You can squeeze that one down to 10 megabytes, less than 1/3 the size of the original. That's a huge savings, especially when you can't really tell the difference after you uncompress it. So lossy compression gives you smaller files, which is great if you're a tourist. So I've oversimplified this tremendously when I talked about the Japanese flag and how you can use less information by just saying, big white rectangle and big red circle. Cosine transforms, wavelength compression artifacts, all sorts of mathematical tricks. These were all defined back in the 1980s by a whole bunch of experts that were pulled together in one room. And these experts were experts in photography, experts in computer science, experts in psychology and cognitive perception, and all of these experts from all the different areas that were required to figure out what's the proper balance between storage and perception. This is the experts that they pulled together was the Joint Photographic Experts Group, or JPEG for short. That's where this came from. And they specified a nice way to compress it, but the one thing they didn't specify was how much to actually squeeze it. You get to make that choice. And that's why every time you save a JPEG in Photoshop, it asks you, what compression level do you want? Photoshop gives you choices between 1 and 12. That's because it's up to you to figure it out, because only you know how the image is going to be used. If you compress it too much, oh, it's bad. At least it used to be true. Here's a real worst case scenario of JPEG compression artifacts. Now, you'll never see this in real life anymore. In order for me to get this example to you, I had to run a Photoshop action and do an open, modify, save, close, open, modify, save, close, open, modify, save, close. Every time I did it, I modified it a little bit, and then I undid it, and I saved and I closed it. So I wasn't actually manipulating the image, but every time you did a save and a close, it would squeeze the JPEG a little bit. It would compress it a little bit more. And if you do this 200 times, those compression artifacts will snowball. So this was essentially 200 times. Again, you'll never see this in the real world, but this is how bad a JPEG compression artifact will get. And if you show pictures like this online to one of those folks who only shoot RAW, they'll say, see, JPEGs are awesome. JPEGs are awful. If you're only shooting JPEG, you're obviously an idiot. And that's not true anymore. But once upon a time, it was. Here's a piece of software that's no longer available. It allowed the user to store it with 100 different levels of compression. I started with a 3 megabyte image. So, 3 megapixels, this was done a long time ago. But at 3 megapixels, it was a 3 megabyte image, pretty good. If you set the compression level to 51, half of its range, it still looked pretty good. And here I went from 3.2 megabytes to 218 kilobytes. That is really impressive savings, and the image looked pretty gosh darn good. Once you get past the halfway point, things started to look really blotchy. Here I set the compression level to 80, and you can start to see blotchiness, all sorts, and then to 100, like the worst it could possibly be. That's a little bit too much. So here's a case where having too much control of your JPEGs is not at all a good thing. You can't even get a JPEG this bad anymore, even if you tried. But I'm just giving you examples of here's where the user can control the compression level, because it never was specified properly by the Joint Photographic Experts Group. You can see JPEG compression artifacts, however, today, if you shoot with a smartphone. The folks who make the smartphones and pay for the networks, they all have no interest at all in carrying your high quality image over their very expensive pipes. So if you look very carefully at a high frequency content, high frequency means you got black next to white, next to black, white next to right next to each other. Where the black and the white come together, you're gonna see these JPEG compression artifacts. I hope you can all see them here in the close-up of all the text. I'm seeing a few heads shaking up and down, so that's good news. That's where you're gonna find it today. And the only way around that is to shoot RAW with your phone, and you can't really send RAW over your carrier from your cell phone. But if you look for it, these artifacts are there. So can you tell the difference with a modern JPEG now? We talked about the history. Back in the 1980s, when digital cameras were brand new, memory cards were very expensive and very, not very dense. You might be able to hit 18 megabytes on a card. Ooh, that's a lot. So the engineers in Japan decided, well, you want to cater to tourists, right? You want to be able to fit as many images on your memory card as possible. And so they were very overzealous in compressing their JPEGs. That was back then. This was these two examples here were taken a year ago. And they were taken with the camera on RAW and JPEG at the same time. I took each of these, blew them up poster size. And I challenged people who attend my seminars, can you tell which one was a JPEG and which one was the RAW file? And this is a virtual conference right now, so you can't actually look for yourself. But trust me, I've done this. Lots of people looked at it, and some people would even pixel peep, which is what the guy is doing on the right, by examining a picture beyond reasonable scrutiny. By the way, pixel peeping is not an appropriate way to evaluate image quality. Sometimes it's the only thing we have, but nobody looks at pictures like, okay, room full of people, seminars all over the world, nobody was able to tell. And if they thought they knew the answer, they got it wrong, and they thought they had their answer for the wrong reason. So this, as I said at the beginning of the talk, this is a high frequency shot designed specifically to have JPEG compression artifacts show. The fact that you can't tell and they're not there tells me that they are no longer aggressively compressing JPEGs like they used to in the old days. So whatever truth used to be true back in the 1980s about JPEGs is no longer true. If your light and your composition are compelling and your exposure is right for your light, you may not benefit greatly from shooting RAW. Now that's a heretical thing to say. So I'm going to reinforce this a couple different ways. Two important things you need to know about shooting RAW, and I kind of said the first one. If your light is good and your exposure is right for that light, your images may not benefit greatly from shooting RAW because you won't see JPEG compression artifacts anymore. And by the way, remember I mentioned the expanded dynamic range of a RAW file. When I mentioned the light's good and your exposure is right for that light, that means that the dynamic range of your scene will fit within what a JPEG can capture. If you can get all that right in the camera, no great benefit to shooting RAW. Already a lot of you are going to be tuning me out just for saying that. Good light is more important than shooting RAW and post-processing. There's a reason I wrote that in all caps. Just like there's no substitute for good light. I'm sorry. I haven't had enough sleep. Just like there's no substitute for proper focusing, there is no substitute for good light. And that also that goes for RAW too. If you don't have good light, shooting it in RAW and fixing it later is not an option. And to help prove that, I got an example here. This was taken with state-of-the-art equipment. It was a 24 megapixel full frame camera. That's when they first came out. It was shot with a Zeiss Prime. You couldn't get better equipment than that. And I'm sure nobody here is going to say, wow. But if you change your light a little bit, that makes a big, big difference. So this is why in my seminars, I hammer it to everybody who attends. Light is more important than anything else. If you don't nail your light and your composition, none of the technical finesse that you learn about learning Photoshop, none of that's going to help you. If you want people to say, wow, when they look at your pictures, which in my mind is one of the big goals of photography, you want to be able to master your light. Not necessarily shooting RAW and fixing it later. Okay, so I got religious for a second. Sorry about that. So, if you've shot RAW before, that was probably not news to you. I'm going to make the case for JPEG right now. Things that you don't hear about in online discussion forums. If you're shooting sports, as I hinted to earlier, you got faster shot-to-shot time. Why? Because JPEGs are smaller, and it takes less time to write them to the memory card. If you're shooting sports in machine gun mode, you absolutely want the better speed. Many of today's bells and whistles are JPEG only because, by definition, if you do any kind of modification of pixels, it's no longer RAW. It's cooked. That's where the RAW term came from, by the way. If you have in-camera panorama, well, your cell phone can do that now. In-camera high dynamic range, multi-frame noise reduction. I think the third one is a Sony-only feature, which I like a lot if I don't bring my tripod with me. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But all three of these are not possible and not selectable if you're shooting RAW only. Many of the in-camera corrections can be done faster for you, so you don't have to do it in Lightroom. Many times, if you have a substandard lens, the engineers can make a more affordable and lightweight lens if they cut a few corners. That's not usually a problem if you can program your camera to fix it in software. It may be a cheap lens, but they have known pincushion distortion. It has known vignetting in the corners. If you have the known principles, known qualities of this lens, you can fix it when you make your JPEG. So the user will never know. So if you can fix it in software, why spend the extra money for a Zeiss Prime when you can't tell the difference at the end of the day? Again, a lot of people are going to be yelling at me for saying that also. Oh, good. A car alarm is going off. Did I mention I'm doing this from a motorhome? I'm going to keep going. Dynamic range optimization is where the camera will be able to lighten the shadows in certain cases. And there's a story I have about that with a National Geographic photographer. You also have faster image review on your computer. I'm going to close this window here so it's less loud. If you are shooting a wedding, and if you want to be able to put together a slideshow at the end of the day, well, you can't do that with shooting RAW because it'll take 5 hours just to load all your RAW files into Lightroom. You want to be able to go over things very quickly with JPEG, cull your best images, throw them into directory, and start your slideshow. So JPEGs are great for that too. Here's an example of the distortion you will find Many times you'll not even know it's there because when the camera writes the JPEG to the memory card, it fixes the pincushion distortion for you. And when you open up a RAW file in Lightroom, whenever you write a RAW file to the memory card, in addition to all the bits, it also writes down what your 1 hour photo settings were in your camera. If you had your contrast set to something, it writes it in the RAW file. It doesn't apply it, but it writes it there. If you have your contrast, you have your white balance, all those things are written to the memory card. It's up to the program when you open the RAW file to look at what those settings were and dial it in for you. So hopefully, when you open the RAW file, it'll look as good as a JPEG. It never does, but that's the goal. It also writes into it what the pincushion distortion and the vignetting corrections were. And that's why when you open up a file in Lightroom, which was made with a lens of known distortion and known all that, Lightroom fixes it for you, and in many cases, it doesn't even give you the option of turning that off. So you may have had a substandard lens and just never know it. Here's the multi-frame noise reduction feature, where you take 3 or 4 images. As soon as you don't have a tripod, it takes 3 or 4 images in sequence. If you have a shaky hand, it aligns it for you in the camera, and then it averages away all the noise. So what you're left with is what's persistent from frame to frame. You get cleaner images using this technique than if you had a tripod with a long exposure, because with a long exposure, noise builds up over the length of the exposure. Not possible with RAW, only JPEG, because technically you're cooking it. And then, you know, once you get to be a certain age, you start to ask yourself philosophical questions like, do you really want to spend more time in front of your computer processing your images, doing what a camera can do for you perfectly well if you nail the elements in your camera? I know my answer. So just to summarize here, RAW is the best your camera can provide, but JPEGs are pretty gosh darn good too if you can nail your light and nail your exposure in the camera. The other downside to RAW is it's not a universally recognized file format. You can't upload it to Costco and say, hey, make a print for this for me. They tend to be rather proprietary. One of the benefits is you can determine what the white balance is later on when you open it up. Whereas I remember when you make, I can't talk. As I said earlier, when you shoot a RAW file, it just pulls the bits from the sensor and writes it to the memory card. Everything else gets applied when you open it up, and that includes the white balance. When you're out shooting the Aurora Borealis, like in the example I showed earlier, I had no idea what white balance to shoot with. So I shot RAW, and I figured it out later. More time post-processing. JPEG takes up much less space in your memory card, faster shot-to-shot time. Does what a 1 hour photo place will do for you and can be read by any program. And again, if you're a journalist out in the field, if you know what you're doing, you can get away with shooting JPEG only because the pressure's on. You don't have the luxury of post-processing. So wrapping things up, I think you know the answers to this. You know, what about the examples? Why was one so hard and the other one wasn't? The answer is this one was shot in the year 2000, 20 years ago, when memory was expensive and not very plentiful. This one was shot last year with the best equipment the money can buy. And JPEGs no longer have those extreme overzealous compression artifacts. And this, by the way, was a fine quality JPEG, not standard, which is the lowest, and not extra fine, which is the highest. It was right in the middle. Even that you couldn't do. So everyone asked me after this seminar, which one was RAW? The answer was the second one was RAW, but the answer actually doesn't matter because if you can't tell, the answer is moot. So to wrap things up here, JPEGs have come quite a long way from 20 years ago. And the anti-JPEG bias that once ruled the internet is no longer valid. Not many people know this. And you know, when's the last time anybody shot a RAW versus JPEG, blew it up to poster size, and see if they can tell the difference? Why question conventional wisdom when you don't hear news about this changing from day to day? I challenge you to do that. Make a print, see if you can tell what was a RAW and what was a JPEG. We have a little bit of time for questions, but before I open it up for that, I want to take this opportunity to plug my businesses because I can. Please buy my books. If you have a Sony, a Fujifilm, an Olympus mirrorless camera, my books are some of the best out there. I have a worldwide reputation on the internet for being able to make complex things very easy to understand. And I have lots of examples for everything. I'm not going to push my seminars here. We actually hired a camera crew and taped one of my seminars back in 2014. And it's available as a streaming product. You can enjoy it in the comfort of your home. But I saw so much outstanding work from the Photo Club earlier before my talk. I don't think you need it. And so I'm going to skip this commercial. I'm going to skip this. I want to get to the Camera Craft. There we go. The Camera Craft is one of the best of the old school photo magazines. It has better quality than National Geographic in terms of print quality. It uses a better pulp. It uses better separation process. And we tend to concentrate on the artistry of photography, not just pushing whatever our advertisers want us to herald that month. In fact, when we first started the publication, we were very proud it was ad-free. It was supported completely by subscribers. That's no longer true, but it's still one of the best of the old school photo magazines, and you would really get inspired and you get technical insights that you just won't get anywhere else if you subscribe. FriedmanArchives.com/cameracraft, and that is pretty much my talk. You know what? You weren't looking at those last slides, were you? Camera Craft magazine, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Any questions I can answer, or was I too heretical for anybody's stomach by saying some of these things?
No, I don't think so. And I will, as far as your books are concerned, I have a couple of the Sony books. I found them to be just exactly what I needed, basically. So.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for that. Great. Okay. I knew I was talking to a group of experts. Nobody has any questions. That's wonderful. Did I change anybody's mind about anything at all? Was this new information?
I want to ask you about a myth of JPEGs I have. I don't know if it's still relevant. Used to, if you would edit a JPEG and save it, you lost, you would lose file, and you don't do that. That doesn't happen with raw files. Is that still true, or?
It is true. Every time you open, modify, save, and close a JPEG, you have compressed it a little bit. Now, it's not by a lot, all right, but there's always that rule in my mind, never ever overwrite your originals. But that is a theoretical problem in this day and age. And 20 years ago, that was a big issue. You edit it 3 times, you can already start to see JPEG compression artifacts. Now, I dare you to do it 20 times and see any artifacts pop up.
If you open and close it without modifying it.
If you open and close it without modifying it, then no compression takes place.
Okay.
And you can close it and it won't ask you what compression level do you want me to save it at, because there's no reason to save.
I think if you edit in Lightroom, it's not an issue either.
There's nothing magical about Lightroom. In fact,
but it's not saving the original. It's just storing the.
Oh, you're right. It's just storing the processed file. Right.
Yeah.
It never overwrites the original. So yeah, that's true. One of the biggest disappointments I had with Lightroom was that I discovered the first time I made those giant posters, for my seminars, was that it doesn't always read the information that was written about the 1 hour photo place and about the lens corrections. And the first time I made those 2 posters, the JPEG looked so much better than the raw file did. And there's a true story of a friend of mine who's a National Geographic photographer. He's been on the staff longer than any other photographer, 30 years. And when the dynamic range optimization came out, which is the technology, all the different camera manufacturers had their own version of it. But it's the technique where you can take the information that was captured, lighten only the shadows so it doesn't look quite so dark, and then write it to memory card. The photographer who doesn't do his own processing, he phoned home and said, can you make the JPEGs look can you make the raw files look as good as the JPEGs? And after spending an hour on some of the raw files, the answer came back, we can't do it. That's how fine processing it's gotten. And if you shoot with an iPhone, I gotta tell you, that situation is now magnified because there's so much computational processing going on to lighten shadows and make your background blurrier than what the lens can actually pick up. It can do so much more than what you can do by just processing a raw file. It's amazing. I can't wait for that computational photography aspect of it to trickle up to the big DSLRs and the mirrorless cameras, because I want my pictures to look as good as what my wife takes on her iPhone. You know, it's embarrassing sometimes.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so if I save my raw files, I save them to my desktop or an external drive as a JPEG, and then if I go in and rename that file, is that causing a loss of compression?
No, changing a file name does not compress the file at all. No.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yes. Oh yeah, that was an easy question.
I have a question.
Ask away.
I don't know, I may have missed something, but I have a Fuji and I was told that there's special, is it processing that, or some kind of Fuji software that you can use instead of Lightroom?
Every camera manufacturer has their own software, which you are free to use because they don't want to make the assumption that everybody has spent $600 on Photoshop and Lightroom. What if you didn't? So they give you their own software. Fuji has it, Olympus has it, Sony has it. They are not as powerful as what Lightroom and Photoshop can do, but the learning curve is substantially shallower. One of the other advantages of the manufacturer software is if your camera is brand new, their software will be able to open up a raw file probably earlier than what Photoshop can do. Photoshop, every time new camera models come out, almost always new raw file formats are issued as well, because there are new features that need to be recorded that weren't there 5 years ago. So the new file formats are there. The manufacturers will also roll out software to be able to read those file formats. And there's been many books I've written where I had to open the raw files using the manufacturer's software and not with Photoshop and Lightroom because it took them 2 months to catch up.
Okay.
I don't know if I over-answered. The software is very good. Nothing wrong with it. Fuji also, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Fuji has like a special thing about their color. They're supposedly really special or whatever they say. And so I was told that Lightroom doesn't read it as well as the Fuji software would.
Here's my take on that. If you're shooting RAW, all it does is pull the information off the sensor and write the memory card. And then when you open it up, you can choose a white balance if you want to be able to have special color science. It's all done in the RAW file. If you don't like the way the colors are showing up, you can tweak them because you shot RAW, also JPEG. I don't think that's a valid argument. But you will not find a lot of people who share that opinion. You know, if you don't like the way the Fuji colors come out, change your sliders, make it look more like the Canon. Canons tend to look a little bit more yellowish. Fuji also has some really nice filters inside the camera to emulate film. A lot of people switch to Fuji just because they like that look. It looks kind of grainy. It looks like some of the colors are oversaturated. Yeah, like the Kodacolor Gold was back in the 1970s.
Right.
Anyway, I'm having a hard time reading a name.
Sorry, it's my email, but Anitra, thank you.
Okay. Were you the one taking the picture of the skateboarder with the wavy edge and the skateboarder way in the background? That was the most original skateboarding picture I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
Well
so
done
much.
on that one.
I laid down on my stomach to take it. So, they were kind of looking at me strange, but
Lay down on your stomach. I got to tell you, there is something to be said for cameras that have pull-out screens. So you no longer have to lay down on the ground anymore. I was watching a National Geographic program by a guy who started the Photo Arc program, where he's out to photograph every single species on the planet or something like that. And he shoots with a Nikon, with an optical viewfinder, and the show constantly is showing him he's getting down the ground or being able to do this or getting out of the way. And his life would be so much easier if he just had a flip-out screen. Like, why is, in this day and age, are people still using optical viewfinders? I can't figure this out. Okay, my rant is over. Sorry.
Well, do we have any more questions?
Cool. It was a joy interacting with all of you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for letting me see your work.
Very well done, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Next year, my other popular talk is wireless flash, which happens to be one of my favorite topics. If your goal is to have people say "wow" when they see your pictures, controlling your light's the way to do it. And I'll stop right there. Oh, applause! Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I might look into that one.
All right,
Again,
and I shall bid you adieu. Good night, everybody.
we hope to see you next year. Thank you, Gary.
Good night, Gary.
I'll be around. It'll be a joy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing everybody in November. We'll have a great presentation. And y'all be safe.
Hasta lumbago.
Hasta luego.